Um, if I could just let you know, like, how much money I could put, would you be able to ballpark it? Like, or I'm not too sure how it works.
Yeah, no, I think so many loan officers just really kind of complicate the process. So I can get a couple basic questions from you and we can determine that in a couple minutes here, dude.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Let's do it.
Yeah. So what do you own or rent right now? What's the current situation?
So I had a rental up until like 6 months ago, and I've been staying at my parents' since.
Nice,
So
dude. So
technically,
stacking.
yeah, we're saving money right now.
Okay. And when you guys are both going to do this together, right? Were you guys renting separately?
Yes.
What were you
Yeah,
guys what were you guys spending separately before? What was she spending month to month and what were you spending month to month?
she lived in San Francisco. She was paying like 25 and some change, I think, a month.
Mm-hmm.
I had a house with five of the dudes in
Okay.
Seattle, so it was much cheaper. I was spending like 1,400
Okay.
a month.
So about $4,000 a month. When you guys transitioned into owning something, do you want to pay the same, less, or more? What's like your goal?
I mean, personally, like I've had a good couple of years at work and haven't spent much money on anything like this. So like I was picturing probably like trying to keep it around like 6 grand, but that's also where it comes in like, can't I pay a lot less monthly the more I put down?
We'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to be fair to your question, then we'd be comfortable, probably. I mean, obviously, the lower the better for monthly
Yeah.
because we have a good chunk to put down. But like 5 to 6 would be fine with us.
Okay. And if like you find the absolute perfect house, how high are you willing to go before you draw a line in the sand and walk away from something? What's your max?
Yeah, I think. I mean, honestly, I think it would be a little dependent on like what the mortgage I could get approved would be.
Mhm.
But like just thinking of it big picture, I probably would be looking around like 1.2, um, 1.3 as maybe a ideal max.
Sure. But what about payment monthly? Let's start there. Where do you draw a line in the sand on a monthly payment? Is 6,000 your cap? You willing to go to like 68 if it's really awesome?
I probably would. Yeah, it would be like six and some change.
Okay,
Ideally, like
cool.
maybe 65 cap.
All right, good. So what about access to capital? So forget like down payment percentages, just a dollar amount. Do you guys have a dollar amount in total
Yeah,
that you're good with? And this would
yeah,
be for down payment, closing costs, like all pennies in. What are you comfortable walking away from?
yeah. Probably about 400.
Okay, awesome. Tons of cash. So we're going to really get dynamic here, but it's going to be palatable. You'll understand it. The one thing I really want you to be considering here is like, where is that cash now and what else can we do with it to create better wealth for yourself in the future? Whether you put down 20%, which could be 200,000, maybe a little bit more, or 400,000. Yes, it's going to change your payment. I'll show you that in a little bit, but that asset, which is that piece of real estate, it's never going to be worth more money. It's always worth the same in the future, regardless of what you put down. So, as an example, let's say we put the minimum down, you take the delta of that cash, maybe invest it with John Haas, our financial advisor. He
Yeah,
manages my money.
yeah.
He
He's got
might
mine too.
he might be able to make you more money in a shorter amount of time by keeping it in the market, which overall is going to reduce that cash flow conceptually. Okay.
Right.
So we'll go back to that and visit it in a minute. But hypothetically, with that amount of cash, it's probably good to put 20% down as a minimum.
Yeah.
And then you're going to need another 3% for the basic cost to buy any piece of real estate. And that's pretty standard in the nation. That's
Yeah.
like appraisal, um, prepaying some of your homeowner's insurance, title fees, all those little pennies that go into it. Okay.
Right.
So that's super helpful for one major reason. Regardless of the house you walk up to, let's say it's 1.125, Well, you take that number, multiply it by 23%, and that's about 260,000. Okay.
Right.
Every dollar you put down on top of that, I'm going to give you your cost of money now, which is going to help you calculate your value of depleting that cash for what you think is a savings in your home, even though that savings, again, isn't going to make that asset worth more money. So
Right.
stretching that payment up for the purpose of keeping your money liquid and invested is going to give you more future growth. So every 100,000 that we borrow right now, Steve, you're typically going to be looking at about $670 per 100,000. That's helpful for a couple reasons. One, if you borrow 100,000, it only costs you $670. But if you deplete your liquidity and stick it into a piece of real estate, which again is going to be worth the same when you go to sell it regardless, you're only going to save $760. Now, part of that's principal reduction, right? So the interest portion of that for the first like couple years is about $550. So you're only saving about $550 per 100,000 in interest because the rest is going to pay your principal down. Make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So once you get to that 20,
It's kind of pointless, bro.
Benefit.
No, dude. And then once it's in the house, it's stuck in the house unless you refinance or sell it. So you're kind of in a good position in the sense that if rates come down, you could refinance and take that money back out. But we always want to make the assumption that let's set this mortgage up perfect from the start so that we never need to refinance again. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So if I take your $6,000 payment and we look at the property taxes on $1 million property, you're probably under 6,000 a year. So that's just simple math. That's $500 a month. You're probably going to need maybe another $200 on top of that, $2,400 a year for homeowners insurance. And maybe you land in a gated community. That's kind of a variable, but let's round off your HOA dues for a gated community. And let's round your insurance off collectively. Let's just call that $300 to be safe, okay?
That's monthly, right?
Yeah. So these are the 3 buckets of fixed costs before we introduce a mortgage. So if it's 500 for taxes, we said 200 for insurance and maybe an extra $100 for association dues. That's $800. Make sense?
Wait, sorry, can you repeat the last one?
Yeah, we did 500 taxes, 200 for insurance, and $100 for the association fees. Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'm gonna back that out of $6,000, which is your max. You have $5,200 left over. Remember I said it's $670 per 100,000?
Yeah.
Well, if I divide that by $670, that's about a $780,000 mortgage. $670 fits into $5,200, 7.8 times. And again, that's per 100,000. So that would be a $780,000 mortgage. Well, if you buy $1 million property, well, then you know you're putting down that 220, you're clear of like that 20% down right there. You're in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
20% down would be an $800,000 mortgage. Well, if it's $670 per 100,000, that's the same math as $67 per 10,000. So to borrow that extra 20 grand to take your loan amount from 780 up to 800,000, that's $10,000 twice. So that's $67 twice. That's only $134 a month. So $1 million property is going to cost you probably closer to 6,200. Every 100,000 you increase on top of that, you're going to add about 600 to 670 bucks a month. So if you go to 1.1, you're closer to like 6,700. If you go to 1.2, you're over that 7,000 mark month to month. Okay. Now I'm using a 6.99 rate, but if I look at 100,000 at let's say 6.5%, that takes that cost of money down to about $640 per 100,000. So it's not going to move the needle a ton.
Right.
And I'm padding the rate a little bit because you're not ready to lock a rate in because you're contracted on a house today. So I would probably use that 670 per 100,000 or even 700 per 100,000. So for perspective, that's the same as $7,000 if you took out $1 million mortgage.
Right.
Perfect. So
Good. Sorry, just to make sure I'm on the same page, like really rough right now is $1 million property, putting 20% down, 67 per month. 6,700 per month.
yeah, you'll be a little bit below that $1 million property, right? You're going to need a total of 230,000 for down payment and closing costs. And you're going to be closer to 6,200 per month.
Yeah. So I think
Perfect.
too, like for me, not having to put down the 400, I'd be able to spend a lot more monthly. That was kind of assuming that I pretty much cashed out everything into the house.
That's exactly right.
6,200 doesn't sound nearly as scary in that situation.
No, because you're probably going to live there for 7 years or less, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So if I take the 400,000 in cash that you have, I deduct the 230 to buy this particular property. You have 170,000 left over. Well, if I divide that by 7 years and then break that down monthly, you could borrow $2,000 from yourself, $4,100 from your job, and now you're making up for that $6,100 to $6,200 housing expense. I'd rather see you hold on to that cash so that if there's an emergency, or let's say you want to make a job change, you can really slow down that process and take your time because you're going to have that padding. Now, if you really want to get tactical, what I would do is I would probably invest that full 400 with John. Then I would take what's called a security backed loan. I would borrow 230,000 from my assets for the down payment of my house. And then I would go buy the house because that full 400,000 is going to be working in the market. His rule of thumb is every 7 years, he can double your assets under management. So if you give him 400, even though you took a loan against it, he's going to turn that into 800,000 in 7 years, and your house is going to appreciate at the exact same rate. So you're doubling up on your cash and making home appreciation. You're going to kill it.
100%. For me too, just like background, like all of my cash, like that's my cash is with Haas. I have some like family money for housing that is part of this too, that I don't necessarily think I can move to Haas. You know what I mean?